The last thing I remember of a normal life was the taste of a chicken sandwich and the sight of white clouds outside the window of Lanza Flight 508. It was Christmas Eve, 1971. I was 17 years old, sitting next to my mother, Maria. We were flying from Lima to Pucallpa to meet my father for the holidays. The air turned violent without warning. One moment the cabin was filled with the soft chatter of passengers and the crinkle of gift wrap. The next, we were a toy in the hands of a titan. The Lockheed Electra began to shudder, not the usual vibration of turbulence, but a deep, structural groan. Outside, the sky turned pitch black, illuminated only by jagged streaks of lightning that seemed to dance on the wings. "This is the end," my mother said. Her voice was calm, a stark contrast to the screaming passengers around us. Those were the last words I ever heard her speak. A blinding flash hit the right wing. The engine exploded. For a split second, the plane felt like it was suspended in time. Then, the world tore apart. The fuselage snapped like a dry twig. The roar of the engines was replaced by the deafening whistle of the wind as I was sucked out into the void. I was still strapped to my seat, row 19F. I was falling, spinning through the air like a sycamore seed. I remember the sensation of the cold air rushing past me, the dizzying sight of the green canopy rushing up from below, and then silence. I woke up on Christmas Day. The first thing I felt was the silence. No engines, no screams, just the rhythmic drip of rain on broad leaves and the distant call of a bird. I was on the ground, still strapped into the 3-seat bench. It had acted as a parachute, or perhaps the dense foliage had cushioned the final impact. My body was a map of pain. My collarbone was snapped. I had a deep gash on my right arm and a concussion that made the world tilt. My right eye was swollen shut. But I was alive. "Mommy!" I cried out. My voice was a rasp. "Mommy!" Only the jungle answered. I crawled out from under the seats, searching the immediate area. I found a small bag of candy, panettone, and some sweets. That was my only food. I looked for survivors, for wreckage, for anything. There was nothing but green shadows. My parents were zoologists. I grew up in the Amazon at their research station, Penguana. My father had taught me the first rule of the jungle. If you are lost, find water. Follow the stream to the creek to the river. Where there is a river, there are people. I found a small spring trickling over stones. I began to follow it. My sandals had been lost in the fall, leaving me with only one shoe. Every step was agony. The floor of the jungle is a carpet of roots, thorns, and rotting vegetation. The heat was stifling, a wet blanket that never lifted. My wounds began to fester. The gash on my arm became infested with blowfly maggots. I watched them burrowing under my skin, eating me alive. I knew I couldn't stop to rest for too long. If I stopped, I would die. I moved like a ghost through the trees. I saw king vultures circling high above. I knew why they were there. They had found the others. I had to keep moving so they wouldn't find me. By the 4th day, the small spring had become a stream. The water was waist-deep in places. I swam when I could to save my strength, letting the current carry me. I was terrified of caimans and piranhas, but I remembered my father's words. The water is safer than the shore. On the shore, there are jaguars and snakes. In the water, you are just another piece of driftwood. Hunger became a dull ache, replaced by a crystalline focus born of desperation. I ran out of candy on the 3rd day. Now I drank only the murky water of the river. The jungle began to play tricks on me. I heard the sound of plane engines in every buzz of a cicada. I saw the white fuselage of the aircraft in every flash of a tropical flower. I talked to myself to stay sane, reciting poems I had learned in school or explaining the classification of the plants I passed as my father would have done. My maggots were getting bigger. They were the size of my fingernail now, pulsing under my skin. The pain was rhythmic, a stabbing sensation every few seconds. I was becoming part of the jungle, a decaying organism being reclaimed by the earth. On the 8th day, the stream joined a large river, the Shabonya. It was wide and slow. I floated in the middle, my head barely above water. I was so thin that my ribs pushed against my skin like the hull of a wrecked ship. I saw a large caiman on the bank, watching me with golden eyes. I didn't feel fear. I felt a strange kinship. We were both just trying to survive the day.
I was drifting toward death when I saw it. A glint of something that didn't belong in nature. A straight line. I pulled myself onto the muddy bank, my limbs feeling like lead. It was a boat, a small wooden dugout canoe moored to the shore. I thought I was dreaming. I crawled toward it, reaching out to touch the rough wood. It was real. Nearby, I saw a small path leading to a hut. It was a shelter used by lumbermen. It was empty, but it had a roof of palm leaves and a floor of pounded earth. Most importantly, I found a can of gasoline. I remembered what my father did to the cattle at the station when they had maggots. I opened the can and poured the gasoline directly into the wound on my arm. The pain was an explosion. It felt like my arm was being cauterized by a lightning bolt. I screamed until I lost my voice. But as the gasoline burned, dozens of maggots began to crawl out of my flesh. I picked them out, one by one, 30 of them, until the wound was clean. I collapsed on the floor of the hut and slept for the first time without the fear of being eaten. I woke to the sound of voices, not the voices of my hallucinations, but the rough, rhythmic speech of men. 3 Peruvian lumbermen found me. When they first saw me, a skeletal girl with one shoe covered in blood and gasoline emerging from the shadows, they thought I was a Yara, a water spirit from their legends. They almost fled in terror. "Please," I whispered in Spanish, "I am a girl from the Lanza crash." They were kind. They washed me, fed me salt and bread, and treated my wounds. The next day, they took me on an 11-hour boat journey down the river to a small village. From there, a bush pilot flew me to a hospital where I finally saw my father. He was a broken man, but when he saw me, he wept. Out of 92 people on that flight, I was the only one who came back. They found the wreckage a few days later. They found my mother. She had survived the fall too, but she was badly injured and couldn't move. She had lived for several days in the jungle, waiting for help that never came, while her daughter was miles away fighting her way to the river. That realization is a shadow that has followed me for 50 years. I didn't become a victim. I became a biologist, like my parents. I returned to the Amazon many times. People call me the girl who fell from the sky, but I don't feel like a miracle. I feel like a part of the forest. The jungle tried to take me, then it tried to break me, and finally, it taught me how to live. I still fly, but whenever the plane hits turbulence and the cabin begins to shake, I close my eyes and feel the wind. I remember the sensation of falling, and I remind myself that even when the world breaks apart, there is always a river. And as long as you follow the water, you can find your way home.